Imagine you're sitting in a dimly lit, a classic fantasy tavern.
Right, like the kind that smells heavily of roasted meat and stale ale.
Exactly. Stale ale, the sharp bite of wood smoke in the air.
Yeah.
And normally in a place like this, you'd be leaning in to hear a bard spin some grand tale, right?
Right.
Like about a lone hero slaying a dragon with a glowing magical sword.
Right, the typical high fantasy stuff.
Yeah. But today, the person sliding into the booth across from you, they aren't a bard.
No, definitely not.
It's an accountant. And sitting right next to that accountant is like a spy master?
Yeah, flanked by a geopolitical strategist.
Exactly. So instead of a simple tale of good versus evil, they are about to hand you this absolute masterclass.
A masterclass in the anatomy of a coup.
Right, and the hidden economics of total war. Plus, the really devastating, just soul-crushing cost of trying to stay neutral in a world that is basically burning down around you.
It's wild. It completely upends everything you expect from a high fantasy narrative, honestly.
It really does. And that is the exact reality we are unpacking today as we dive into Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt.
Yeah, we are basically taking a magnifying glass to this incredibly dense, continent-spanning conflict today.
Right. We're stripping away all those fantasy tropes to look at the brutal geopolitical machinery humming right beneath the surface of the text. So, welcome to the deep dive.
I mean, the sheer scale of the political maneuvering here is just staggering.
Oh, totally. And it's fascinating how Sapkowski, who is translated brilliantly by David French, by the way.
Oh, and brought to life so well in the audiobook by Peter Kenny.
Yes, absolutely. How he manages to make the underlying logistics of this world just as thrilling as the magic.
Which is not easy to do.
No, it's not. So our mission today for this deep dive is to deconstruct this massive conflict. We're going to map out exactly how a political coup unfolds in real time.
Right. And we'll explore how shifting economic data, of all things, can actually predict a massive war long before the first arrow is even fired.
Yeah, and we'll also examine the heavy toll exacted on those who claim they can just stand on the sidelines.
The cost of neutrality, basically.
Exactly. But just a quick note before we jump in. We are looking at some really intense, brutal, fictional politics here today.
Yeah, we're dealing with the Nilfgaardian Empire, the Northern Kingdoms, the Scoia'tael rebels.
And the mages, of course. And we just want to make it clear to you, the listener, that we are here strictly as impartial guides.
Right, we're just analyzing the architecture of this fictional conflict.
Exactly. We are not taking sides or endorsing Emperor Mhir's foreign policy or, the mage's internal betrayals or anything like that.
No, definitely not. We are just reading the board exactly as it's set up in the source text.
Right. We're looking at the mechanics of power, nothing more.
And, well, the way those mechanics are introduced is brilliant. Because it starts with this deeply uncomfortable physical reality.
Yeah, we don't start on some glorious battlefield with banners waving. We start on a dusty, miserable road leading to the city of Gors Velen. And immediately, the text just hits us with this jarring, incredibly physical contrast.
It's super visceral.
It is. So on one hand, we have our main characters, Ciri and Yennefer, riding toward the city.
But to get there, they have to pass a crossroads.
Yeah, and it is a gruesome scene. There are 9 wooden posts driven into the hard earth.
Right, topped with heavy cartwheels.
And bound to those wheels are the mutilated corpses of the Scoia'tael, the elven rebels.
Yeah, they've been left out there for the carrion birds. It's this stark, rotting warning to anyone who might harbor rebel sympathies.
It's sickening, and the text doesn't let you look away from it either.
No, it specifically notes the wind, right?
Yep.
Blowing the stench of rotting corpses right over the travelers.
Yeah, it forces you to confront the horrific, unglamorous reality of the guerrilla war being waged in the forests right now.
Right, this isn't some clean, heroic rebellion. It's a brutal, muddy, bloody suppression.
Exactly. The Empire and the Northern Kingdoms are crushing these non-human rebels with just absolute prejudice.
And they want everyone walking into that city to literally smell the consequences of defiance.
Yeah. But right after this horrific encounter with the grim reality of the world, look at what Yennefer does.
Oh, this is such a great moment.
Right. She stops just outside the city gates, and she takes out this small mirror, and she applies a magical ointment called glamour.
Yeah, and suddenly her eyes burn with this violet light. And she radiates this dazzling, provocative, almost unnatural beauty.
It is pure, calculated manipulation.
Oh, 100%.
She does this so she can literally just breeze past the city guards.
Right, she doesn't want to deal with them.
And the guards are so entirely stunned by her manufactured appearance that they don't even ask for her name.
Let alone question the young girl, Ciri, riding right next to her.
Exactly. And that contrast is the foundational theme of everything we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, you have the raw, ugly, physical violence of the world, like the dead elves rotting on wheels.
Right, placed directly next to the pristine, magical, manufactured facade of the Enchantress.
Right, because Yennefer is using her innate power to completely bypass the rules that govern ordinary people.
Yeah, the guards who would relentlessly interrogate a common merchant or a refugee, they just step aside for her.
Which establishes the mages as a class that operates entirely outside the boundaries of normal society.
Yes, exactly. But the real insight in this opening sequence, it doesn't actually come from Yennefer's magic.
No, it comes from where they go immediately after walking through those gates.
Right. They don't head to some magical academy or a royal court to discuss the fate of the world.
No, they go to a bank.
Giancardi's bank.
Yeah.
They walk off the sunlit street into this dark, cool office smelling heavily of ink, parchment, and old money.
It's such a vibe shift.
It really is. And they sit down with Molnar Giancardi, a dwarven banker.
And what follows is, it's one of the most fascinating deconstructions of fantasy tropes I've ever read.
Totally. Giancardi lays out the economic realities of the Northern Kingdoms, and his analysis is just chillingly precise.
Because Giancardi understands something that the kings and the sorcerers in this world continually ignore.
Which is what?
That wars are not started by swords. They are started by ledgers.
Yeah, that's so true.
He begins talking about the crushing weight of the current tax policies. Yeah. He brings up the poll tax and the winter billeting tax.
Right, noting that they have recently been doubled by the military authorities.
Yeah, but then he highlights a very specific, devastating financial instrument.
The new tax?
Right, he talks about a compulsory non-human donation of 10% that has just been levied.
And this is where the sheer cruelty of the system really becomes apparent.
Yeah, because dwarves, elves, gnomes, halflings, basically anyone non-human who engages in trade in the cities.
Right. They are now being hit with this massive extra tax.
Yeah, Giancardi flat out states that he is handing over 60% of his total income to the royal treasury right now.
60%. That's insane. And the implications of that math are profound. Yennefer realizes it immediately.
Right, because human merchants are not paying this donation.
Right.
So that means the dwarves and the other non-humans who have assimilated, who live and work in the human cities.
The ones just trying to survive.
Right, they're being forced to effectively finance the military campaigns that are currently out in the forests.
Hunting down and slaughtering their fellow non-humans.
Exactly.
Right.
The very military operation that put those dead elves on the cartwheels at the crossroads.
Is being paid for by the elven and dwarven merchants trapped inside the city walls.
It's state-sponsored extortion funding a genocide.
And the victims are the ones footing the bill. It is incredibly dark.
It really is.
But Giancardi, he isn't just complaining about his tax burden here. He is actively reading the economic tea leaves.
Right. He knows what these taxes are actually funding.
Yeah, and he points out two massive, glaring red flags to Yennefer that prove a major continental war is no longer just a possibility.
It is an imminent certainty.
Right. First, he points to the commodities market.
Yeah, the diamonds.
Yeah, the price of precious stones is skyrocketing at an unprecedented rate.
And he explains exactly why in the most brutally pragmatic terms possible.
Right. Break that down for us.
Well, a pouch of diamonds weighing a few ounces has the exact same financial value as 50 marks.
Okay.
But 50 marks in standard coin weighs roughly 25 pounds and requires a really large sack.
Right. Right.
So when the political situation destabilizes, the first thing the wealthy do is prepare for extraction.
Yeah, because if you wake up in the middle of the night and have to grab your family and run for your life across a hostile border.
A pouch of diamonds in your pocket is significantly easier to carry than a giant sack of coins slung over your shoulder.
Exactly. Capital flight always precedes physical flight.
Yeah. The wealthy elite in the northern kingdoms are liquidating their heavy assets into highly portable, universally valued gems.
Because they know the borders are about to collapse.
Right. They are preparing to run north to neutral, stable countries like Kovir.
And it's so incredibly telling that the market reacts before the armies even mobilize.
Oh, absolutely.
The sudden spike in diamond prices is basically the panic of the elite translated into raw data.
Precisely. And the second red flag Giancardi points out is even more direct and militaristic.
The boats!
Yes. He notes an incredible surge in industrial activity on the coast.
Right. All the boat builders are suddenly drowning in massive orders.
Keen Fulton's quartermasters are paying top dollar for every single shallow draft boat they can construct.
And they are secretly transporting these boats south to hide them deep in the forests along the Yaruga River.
Right. And the Yaruga is the massive natural border between the northern kingdoms and the Nilfgaardian Empire.
Right, and the official story is that these boats are just for routine embarkation drills.
Right, drills. So
Yeah. But Giancarlo looks at the sheer volume of the orders and knows that's a lie.
yeah, you don't bankrupt your treasury buying that many boats just for a drill.
No, they're literally stockpiling amphibious landing craft.
Which tells Giancarlo, and us as the audience, that the Northern Kings are secretly planning a massive, preemptive military strike across the river.
They are preparing to invade Nilfgaardian-held territory.
Yeah. The author is using a completely mundane banking transaction to build immense, world-shifting tension here.
It's so smart. Long before a general gives a speech or a mage casts a fireball, the war is already happening in the ledgers.
The supply chains are moving, the money is shifting.
Giancarlo sees the future with absolute clarity through his accounting books.
He really does.
But, it's easy to look at Giancarlo and think, well, he's just a paranoid banker stressing over his bottom line.
Sure.
I mean, in a world where people can literally cast lightning from their fingertips and see the future in a prophetic trance, is a cold, hard ledger really the most reliable oracle? Doesn't magic eventually trump economics?
Well, see, that is the central irony of this entire narrative arc.
How so?
The text heavily suggests that magic, rather than clarifying reality, is actually blinding its users to it.
Wow. Okay.
The mages are so deeply obsessed with their own internal politics, their theoretical debates,
Right.
and their vast cosmic power that they are completely missing the physical ground shifting beneath their feet.
While Giancarlo is objective.
Exactly. A ledger does not have an ego. It doesn't care about magical lineage or court intrigue.
The ledger just tracks raw human behavior, fear, preparation, greed, survival.
Right. The mages, however, are completely consumed by their egos.
Yeah.
While the bankers are reading the data and preparing for the end of the world, the supposedly smartest, most powerful beings on the continent are basically busy throwing a cocktail party.
Which takes us perfectly from the quiet, ink-stained office of the bank straight into the blinding, opulent halls of the Aretuza banquet on the island of Thened.
It's such a drastic transition.
It is. We transition from cold, hard numbers to the absolute pinnacle of magical society.
Right. Geralt and Yennefer attend this grand gathering of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers.
And right from the start, Geralt is just entirely out of his element.
Oh, he hates it.
He is actively grumbling about every single detail.
It's a fantastic narrative choice, honestly, to experience this banquet through Geralt's perspective.
Yeah, because Geralt is our grounded, profoundly pragmatic observer thrown into a room full of people who genuinely consider themselves demigods.
Right, he is a witcher. He spends his life sleeping in the mud and fighting monsters in sewers.
And now he's in high society and he utterly despises it.
Yeah, he's complaining about the bizarre, almost punishing etiquette of the event.
Like the fact that they have to eat standing up.
Yes, they are in this incredibly opulent, massive hall. The ceiling is painted with elaborate frescoes. The architecture is stunning.
But it's freezing cold because it's drafty.
Right, and Geralt notes that stopping too long by the massive buffet tables is considered a major social faux pas.
You are supposed to just glide around, nibbling on caviar, looking graceful.
And the grand candelabras providing the light, they aren't even real fire. They are elaborate magical illusions.
Yeah, there is this immense, overwhelming superficiality to the entire event.
And that superficiality is not accidental. It is the entire point of the gathering.
Right. The banquet is an exercise in projecting an image of untouchable power and unity.
Exactly. You mentioned the magical candelabras, but the performance goes much deeper, right down to the fashion and the interpersonal dynamics.
Oh, the fashion. Let's talk about Sabrina Glevissig.
Yeah, she attends the banquet wearing an aggressively transparent black chiffon blouse.
That reveals practically everything.
Right, and this immediately leads to incredibly catty, passive-aggressive verbal sparring between her and Yennefer.
They trade fake compliments and forced smiles while secretly despising each other.
They're entirely focused on outmaneuvering each other socially.
The tension is so thick you could cut it with a sword.
Yeah, and Triss Marigold is there, too. Incredibly awkward around Yennefer and Geralt because of her past history with him.
Right, right. But the absolute most horrifying example of this superficiality, of this obsession with appearances.
Oh, Lydia.
Yes, Lydia van Bredevoort. She is introduced as an assistant to the immensely powerful mage Vilgefortz.
Yeah, and we are told by the text that she is considered a, quote-unquote, meaningless individual in the grand scheme of the Brotherhood.
But that looking her directly in the face is a serious faux pas.
Right. And why? Because as we learn later when the violence erupts, the lower half of her beautiful face is actually a highly complex, sustained magical illusion.
Yeah, when the illusion drops, it reveals a horrific mutation.
Her jaw is essentially a skull with exposed teeth and poorly knitted bones.
It's the result of a magical experiment gone completely wrong.
Yeah, and Lydia's face is the perfect, chilling metaphor for the entire brotherhood of sorcerers.
Because it is a beautiful, flawless, meticulously maintained magical facade that is hiding deep structural rot.
And impending grotesque violence.
Yeah. The mages at this banquet genuinely believe they are the masters of the universe.
They believe their intellect and their power place them far above the petty squabbles and border disputes of the human kings they advise.
But in reality, beneath the caviar and the chiffon, they are completely fractured.
Oh, totally fractured.
Let's break down those fractures, because this room isn't just a party. It is a powder keg disguised as a high society mixer.
Yeah, the Brotherhood is split into deeply entrenched factions.
Right. First, you have mages who are secretly loyal to the invading Nilfgaardian Empire.
It's led by figures like Vilgefortz and the elven sorceress Francesca Findebert.
Then you have mages fiercely loyal to the northern kings, spearheaded by Philippa Eilhart.
And Philippa isn't even trying to hide her affiliation.
No, she is literally walking around the banquet arm in arm with Dijkstra.
The massive, imposing head of Redanian military intelligence.
Right. And finally, you have the neutrals.
Led by the rigidly dogmatic archmistress Tessia de Vries.
And she simply wants to preserve the institution of the Brotherhood at all costs, regardless of the political reality outside their walls.
The hubris on display is staggering. You have a room full of centuries-old beings sharing exquisite food, exchanging air kisses, and complementing each other's magical aura.
While simultaneously, under the table, they are actively plotting to arrest, exile, or assassinate each other.
They genuinely think their mastery of magic insulates them from the very real, very physical war that Giancardi the banker already knows is upon them.
It is exactly like a high-stakes corporate mixer where half the executives in the room know a hostile, bloody takeover is happening at midnight.
Right.
The ink is already dry on the secret contracts, the security guards have already been bribed, the knives are literally out.
But they're all still standing around, sipping expensive champagne and pretending the company's perfectly fine.
Yeah. But looking at these mages, I mean, these are beings who've lived for hundreds of years.
Right.
They possess knowledge and power that ordinary humans can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Why do they allow themselves to be so utterly blinded by petty rivalries, vanity, and political factionalism?
Yep.
Shouldn't a centuries-old demigod be above high school drama?
Well, it is a logical question, but the text makes a profound argument about the nature of prolonged absolute power.
Which is?
Power does not grant wisdom, it grants insulation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. These mages have lived for centuries without ever facing true existential consequences for their actions.
Right, because they can just magic their way out of problems.
Exactly. They view ordinary humans, and even the kings that rule those humans, as fleeting, short-lived, and ultimately insignificant.
So this profound isolation from the daily struggles of normal life has bred an incredible arrogance.
They believe they are the ones moving the chess pieces on the continental board, completely oblivious to the fact that someone else has already set the board itself on fire.
And that beautiful, flawless illusion of control shatters the exact moment the sun comes up.
Quite literally.
Yeah. The sun rises over the island, the banquet officially ends, the attendees head to their quarters.
And the hostile takeover begins.
Which takes us right into the heart of the coup on Thanedd.
Yeah, here we go.
And what I love most about this sequence is that the grand historical pivot of this entire continent begins in the most painfully, comically mundane way possible.
It really does.
Geralt wakes up early and, driven by his impractical scruples, as the text wryly notes.
Right, his scruples.
He refuses to pee in a flower pot on his balcony like a normal, pragmatic person.
Yeah, he decides to get dressed and walk out to the garden to relieve himself properly.
And simply because he does that, He walks straight out of his bedroom and into the middle of an armed insurrection.
It's a masterful grounding touch by Sapkowski.
Totally.
You have all these ancient beings plotting in the shadows, but the actual spark that ignites the event is a witcher who just needed to use the bathroom and was too polite to ruin the landscaping.
Yeah, but the moment Geralt steps into that hallway, the comedic undertone vanishes entirely.
Oh, instantly. The reality of the situation is incredibly stark. The beautiful facade of the banquet is gone, replaced instantly by raw physical aggression.
Yeah, Geralt steps out and immediately sees Philippa Eilhart and Dijkstra commanding a squad of heavily armed Redanian thugs.
And they have tackled a powerful mage named Terra Nova to the stone floor.
Right, and they aren't engaging him in some elegant magical duel. They aren't throwing spells.
No, they are physically subduing him and slapping him in dimeritium handcuffs.
Which, for those who don't know, dimeritium immediately strips away a sorcerer's connection to magic, inducing physical sickness and complete powerlessness.
Yeah. And then another sorceress, Kira Metz, walks up to the helpless Terra Nova and literally punches him in the face with a set of brass knuckles.
The refined, chiffon-draped elegance of the banquet from a few hours ago is instantly replaced by brutal, street-level thuggery.
Yeah. The Northern Loyalists, spearheaded by Philippa, have decided to launch a massive preemptive strike.
Right.
Through Dijkstra's intelligence network, they figured out that Vilgefortz and his faction were actively planning to betray the Northern Kingdoms to the Nilfgaardian Empire during the upcoming conclave.
So rather than debate them, Philippa decided to arrest them all in their beds.
It is a ruthless, calculated decapitation strike.
But the chaos of the arrests quickly spirals completely beyond Philippa's control.
Primarily because of the introduction of a completely unpredictable variable.
Fury. During the confusion and the rounding up of the suspected traitors, Ciri is brought into the main hall, and she is in a deep, terrifying, prophetic trance.
Yeah, and the mages are demanding answers.
And what Ciri reveals in this trance acts as a massive accelerant to the fire already burning in the room.
She announces, in this echoing, unnatural voice, the exact geopolitical truth of the continent.
Right. She reveals that King Demoven of the North staged a false flag attack on a Nilfgaardian border outpost to give himself a casus belli, justification to start the war.
But, she continues, Nilfgaard didn't just react to this provocation, they were waiting for it.
Yeah, they unleashed a massive, pre-planned, overwhelming invasion force that immediately crushed the northern border defenses.
And to make matters catastrophically worse, she reveals that King Vizimir of Verdania,
The very king that Dijkstra and Philippa served.
right, has been assassinated by an unknown party.
So in the span of a few sentences, the entire geopolitical landscape of the world changes forever.
The Northern Alliance is essentially decapitated. The invasion has begun, and the mages realize that the war they thought they could control is already washing over them.
But the true tragedy of St. Ned, the reason it becomes a massacre rather than just a messy political arrest, isn't the Nilfgaardian invasion.
No, it's not.
It is the internal ideological collapse of the mages, driven entirely by the actions of Tissaia de Vries.
Yeah.
Tissaia is such a fascinating, tragic figure. What exactly is her role in turning this coup into an absolute disaster?
Well, Tissaia de Vries represents pure, unyielding, dogmatic idealism.
Okay.
She is an archmistress, one of the oldest and most respected members of the council. She is utterly devoted to the concept of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers as an institution that stands above the petty laws of kings.
Right, so when she walks into that hall and sees Philippa Eilhart using armed, non-magical guards and dimeritium shackles to arrest her fellow mages...
She is physically disgusted.
Right, she refuses to accept the political reality staring her in the face.
Which is that Vilgefortz really is a traitor who sold them out to an invading empire.
But for Tissaia, the procedural violation of the Brotherhood's sacred unity is a far greater crime than high treason.
Exactly. She believes that even traitors must be dealt with according to the ancient rules of their order.
So out of a desperate, wildly misplaced desire to restore order, fairness, and the dignity of the institution, she uses her immense power to lift the anti-magic blockade that Philippa had placed over the island.
Which is arguably the single most catastrophic mistake made by any character in this narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
It is the fatal error that dooms them all. By lifting the anti-magic field, she believes she is leveling the playing field so they can have a civilized debate.
But instead, she inadvertently hands the tactical advantage right back to the Nilfgaardian traitors.
Yeah. The exact second the magic returns, Vilgefortz and Francesca Findabair drop their masquerade.
They unleash a small army of Scoia'tael commandos who had been secretly smuggled into the palace cellars in preparation for this exact moment.
Right. And what was a tense, localized political arrest instantly turns into a chaotic bloodbath.
The rebel elves flood the halls, firing arrows and cutting down unarmed mages.
The palace is engulfed in magical fire, ancient architecture is destroyed, mages are slaughtered by the dozen.
And the Brotherhood of Sorcerers is broken forever, never to recover.
It's completely gone.
So Tissaia is effectively the referee in a football game who sees one team playing too aggressively, so she confiscates everyone's helmets to force them to play fair.
Right.
Completely ignoring the heavily armed rival gangs storming onto the field with baseball bats.
That's a perfect analogy. She prioritized the abstract rules of the game over the physical survival of the players.
But looking at the Northern Loyalists, it's hard to call them innocent victims here either.
No, definitely not.
Was Philippa's brutal, preemptive strike with the Dimeritium actually justified? Or did her immense aggression, her willingness to use brass knuckles and bring foreign intelligence agents into the mage's sacred sanctuary guarantee the destruction of the Brotherhood?
That's a great question.
Didn't she light the match just as much as Tissaia fanned the flames?
Well, it is one of the most compelling ethical debates in the text, exploring the dark nature of preemptive action in a time of crisis.
Yeah.
The text leaves the morality wonderfully ambiguous. Philippa would absolutely argue that her actions were not just justified, but entirely necessary for survival.
Right, because she saw the Nilfgaardian war machine mobilizing.
Exactly. She knew Vilgefortz was working with the Emperor, and she calculated that if she didn't act that very night, Vilgefortz would have murdered the loyalist mages in their sleep.
So she attempted a swift, surgical strike to decapitate the enemy's magical leadership before the war officially began.
However, her methods were undeniably transgressive.
Very.
Bringing armed human soldiers into Aretuza, using Dimeritium to sicken her peers, the physical beatings.
Yeah.
These actions were so violently contrary to the traditions of the Brotherhood that they shattered any remaining illusion of trust.
So Philippa proved to Tissaia that the Brotherhood was already dead in spirit.
Right, which drove Tissaia to make her disastrous emotional choice to lift the field.
Philippa may have been tactically justified in her paranoia, but her brutal execution destroyed the very institution she was theoretically trying to save.
Exactly.
So the grand, high-minded political maneuvering totally collapses into a chaotic melee.
A total mess.
And as the ancient palace of Thaned literally burns to the ground around them, the narrative brilliantly shifts focus.
Right. It moves away from the macro level of kings, spies, and archmages.
And zooming in intimately on the deeply personal fallout of this disaster.
Yeah, the heroes of the story, who have been trying to stay out of the crossfire, are forced into brutal, life-altering physical confrontations.
Right. The abstract theoretical war discussed at the bank and the banquet becomes incredibly terrifyingly intimate.
And we see this most intensely through the perspective of Ciri.
Yeah, as she is fleeing in absolute terror through the burning corridors of the palace, trying to escape the slaughter.
She is suddenly cornered by her ultimate nightmare made manifest.
The Black Knight with the winged helmet?
Cahir.
Yes, Cahir. He is a young Nilfgaardian intelligence operative, but to Ciri, he is a monster.
Right. He is the man who pulled her from the burning wreckage of her home city of Cintra years ago.
And ever since that night, he has haunted her dreams.
For her, he isn't a person. He is the physical embodiment of trauma, slaughter, the death of her family, and the destruction of her childhood.
The massive bird of prey wings on his helmet represent pure, paralyzing terror to her.
He is the boogeyman.
Literally. But here, when she is finally backed into a corner in a ruined courtyard with nowhere left to run, something fundamental shifts inside her.
Yeah, the paralyzing fear that has defined her trauma is suddenly replaced by a surge of savage, desperate fury.
She doesn't freeze. She draws her sword, relies on the grueling physical training she received from the Witchers at Kaer Morhen, and she completely turns the tables on her nightmare.
It's an incredible scene.
She attacks him with a blinding flurry of strikes, moving faster than he can comprehend. She shatters his armor, slashes his hand deeply, and finally, with a precise, powerful blow, knocks the terrifying winged helmet right off his head.
And what she sees beneath that helmet completely shatters her entire worldview.
Yeah, she's standing over him, sword raised, breathing heavily, entirely ready to deliver the mortal blow.
She is expecting to look down into the glowing red eyes of a demon or the scarred, cruel face of a monster.
Instead, she sees sees a pale, dark-haired young man with wide, striking blue eyes.
Right. He's cowering on the ground, bleeding profusely from his hand, and his face is distorted in a grimace of absolute human fear.
He isn't a demon. He's just a terrified boy.
It is a profound, beautifully written moment of deconstruction.
It really is.
The legendary, terrifying Black Knight of Cintra simply ceases to exist. He is completely demystified in an instant.
Ciri realizes that the monster haunting her nightmares for years is, in reality, just a frightened young soldier who is following the orders of an empire much larger than himself.
And in that crucial moment of realization, with his life entirely in her hands, she makes a monumental choice.
She lowers her weapon.
Yeah. She throws her sword down and spares him.
By choosing mercy in a moment and a place defined entirely by contempt, betrayal, and violence, she actively breaks the cycle of her own trauma.
Exactly. She refuses to become the monster that hunted her. She ceases to be a victim and reclaims her agency.
It is such a powerful, resonant moment of humanity. But the tragedy of this sequence is the juxtaposition.
Oh, man. Yeah.
While Ciri is finding her humanity and breaking her trauma cycle by sparing an enemy, her surrogate father, Geralt, is actively losing his humanity.
By becoming the exact kind of monster he usually hunts.
Right. Geralt arrives in the courtyard just moments after Ciri flees, and a squad of Scoia'tael commandos drops down to attack him.
And Geralt absolutely dismantles them.
Yeah, and the text does not frame this as a heroic, swashbuckling fight.
No, it is framed from the perspective of the terrified, pleading Cahir who watches Geralt move.
Cahir doesn't see a hero. He sees a, quote, white-haired fiend.
Geralt kills the elves coldly, calmly, efficiently, with terrifying speed.
He isn't a neutral, philosophical observer anymore. He is a lethal, unthinking force of nature, protecting his daughter at all costs.
He becomes a machine of death.
Yeah.
But the narrative quickly establishes that even a lethal force of nature has its limits in this new world order.
Which brings us to the ultimate, most shocking confrontation of the deep dive.
The duel between Geralt and Vilgefortz.
Yes. This fight is the complete systematic dismantling of the traditional fantasy hero archetype.
Totally, because Geralt is arguably the greatest, most experienced swordsman in the world.
Right. We, as the audience, have spent books watching him cut down horrifying monsters, heavily armed knights, and professional assassins with relative ease.
We expect him to win, or at least put up a legendary fight.
Yeah, he intercepts Vilgefortz to buy Ciri time to escape. But Vilgefortz doesn't even bother to use complex magic to fight him.
No, he doesn't throw fireballs or summon demons.
He simply conjures a heavy, magical iron staff, and what follows is not a duel. It is a complete demolition.
Geralt tries to use every ounce of his legendary speed, his complex pirouettes, his perfectly timed parries.
He lands blows that should be instantly fatal. Strikes to the temple, the neck, the thigh.
But Vilgefortz blocks every single one of them effortlessly.
He is always a fraction of a second faster, a fraction of an inch perfectly positioned.
Vilgefortz is physically superior, magically enhanced, and faster than a Witcher, which shouldn't even be possible.
Right. But more importantly than his physical dominance, Vilgefortz is philosophically superior in this specific moment.
He doesn't just defeat Geralt. He breaks him down methodically.
He shatters Geralt's silver sword. He shatters Geralt's forearm.
And then, with a sickening blow, he smashes Geralt's femur, leaving the legendary hero a crippled, bleeding, helpless mess on the stone floor.
And as he stands over the broken Witcher, Vilgefortz doesn't gloat about his physical strength.
No, he delivers a chilling philosophical line.
He tells Geralt that he mistook the stars reflected in a pond at night for the sky.
That is one of the most haunting lines in the entire series.
It is brilliant. Vilgefortz is telling Geralt that his entire worldview was incredibly small and fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, Geralt is looking at an illusion, a tiny, distorted reflection of reality on the surface of a pond, and arrogantly mistook it for the vast, deep, uncaring universe.
Right. Geralt's strict moral code, his obsessive desire to remain politically neutral, his belief that he could just protect his small found family and ignore the massive geopolitical machinery grinding the continent to dust.
All of it was a childish illusion.
Vilgefortz represents the new, ruthless, industrialized order of the world.
It is an order that literally takes the old rules of honor and swordplay and breaks them over its knee.
Geralt is left completely ruined. Triss Merigold has to magically drag his half-dead body through a portal to safety just to keep him from bleeding to death on the floor.
It is genuinely shocking to read.
It's the equivalent of a grandmaster chess player sitting down for a high-stakes match, totally confident in his openings and his brilliant strategy.
Only to have his opponent simply pick up the heavy, solid oak chessboard and beat him near to death with it.
Exactly. The rules of the game, Geralt thought he was playing, honor, neutrality, individual martial skill.
They simply no longer apply to the reality of the world.
So, did Geralt's famous neutrality and his strict moral scruples actually make him a liability here?
I mean,
Like if he had just taken his friend Dandelion's advice days earlier, grabbed Ciri, and fled the island long before the coup kicked off, would he have avoided this brutal fate? Was his rigid morality ultimately his downfall?
the text strongly implies that his desperate attempt to cling to his scruples is exactly what doomed him.
Yeah.
Remember the incredibly mundane, inciting incident of this entire disaster? The whole reason he was caught in the hallways during the coup was that his scruples prevented him from relieving himself in a flower pot.
Right.
He tried to maintain a sense of civilized decorum in a situation that was rapidly descending into barbarism.
His refusal to pick a side, his stubborn belief that he could stand apart from the conflict and just be an observer, left him completely isolated and vulnerable when the conflict inevitably kicked down his door.
He tried to fight a total, mechanized war with the gentlemanly rules of a formal duel.
And he was physically and spiritually broken because of it.
Yeah.
And as Geralt lies broken in the magical, secluded forest of Brokilon, slowly healing from his shattered bones and shattered worldview, his friend, the bard Dandelion, arrives to deliver the news.
And the news is that the rest of the continent is being systematically broken just as thoroughly as Geralt was.
The era of individual heroes and magical duels is officially dead. The era of industrialized total warfare has arrived.
Which is where the narrative shifts its focus entirely.
Right. We move away from the fiery, chaotic, deeply personal magic of the Thanedd coup and transition into the cold, terrifyingly bureaucratic terror of the Nilfgaardian war machine.
Giancardi the dwarf banker warned us in the very first section that this was coming. He saw it in the ledgers.
And now we see those ledgers come to life in the form of a sweeping, devastating invasion.
Dandelion recounts the grim aftermath of the Nilfgaardian advance, but the author does something brilliant here.
Right, he doesn't just describe the battles.
No, he actually takes us inside the mind of a man named Peter Evertson.
And Evertson isn't a glorious general seeking honor on the battlefield.
He isn't a powerful mage casting destructive spells either.
He is the chief chamberlain and imperial treasurer of the Nilfgaardian Empire.
He is essentially the army's chief bailiff and head accountant.
And while the military commanders around him are cheering wildly about their strategic victories and the routing of the northern armies,
Evertson is just annoyed by the noise they are making.
because Evertson doesn't look out at the conquered lands and see human lives or grand historical moments. He sees pure, raw calculations.
Evertson represents the terrifying, true industrialization of conquest.
The text takes us intimately inside his thought process, and it is entirely composed of spreadsheets and cost-benefit analyses.
Yeah, as massive destructive siege engines roll past his command tent, he isn't marveling at the engineering or thinking about the walls they will shatter.
He is literally pricing them out in his head.
He notes that a mangonel costs 500 florins to build. Trebuchet is 200.
The trained crew required to operate it costs the Empire exactly 9.5 florins a month in wages.
He looks at a glorious, shining company of heavy cavalry riding past, and he mentally calculates precisely what percentage of those men and horses will die of typhus and dysentery in the coming weeks.
And he doesn't calculate this with sorrow or empathy. He calculates it as a standard, inevitable depreciation of military assets.
It is chilling because it is so profoundly detached.
And the orders Evertson receives from Emperor Emhyr are horrifying in their bureaucratic efficiency.
Yeah, the military commander of the Nilfgaardian forces proudly declares war on everything alive and orders a policy of scorched earth to break the spirit of the North.
But Evertson's actual job is to meticulously extract every single ounce of economic value from that earth before the military is allowed to scorch it.
Right. He calmly assigns his clerks to coordinate the confiscation of all the harvested crops from the peasants.
He organizes the quarantine and driving of all livestock south across the border to feed the empire.
He systematically processes the captured civilian refugees, categorizing them and distributing them as slave labor for the empire's infrastructure projects.
He even receives highly specific, detailed orders from the Emperor to systematically dismantle the conquered infrastructure.
Yeah, he is ordered to send teams of engineers into the conquered kingdom of Aedirn to carefully take apart the foundries, the massive weaving mills, and the distilleries.
Pack the machinery onto wagons and transport them back to the Nilfgaardian heartland.
What is so fascinating here is how Sapkowski completely demystifies the concept of war.
Yeah, the violence we are witnessing isn't driven by a desire for martial glory, ancient honor, or even ideological supremacy.
It is driven entirely by ruthless economic extraction.
Nilfgaard isn't just conquering territory to paint the map black. They are aggressively liquidating a rival economy and physically hauling the infrastructure away to enrich themselves.
It is exactly like watching a ruthless modern corporate liquidation.
Imagine a massive multinational conglomerate performing a hostile takeover of a smaller, struggling rival.
The conglomerate doesn't care about the employees' livelihoods or the smaller company's historic brand heritage.
The moment the paperwork is signed, they fire the entire staff. They literally strip the valuable copper wiring from the walls.
They sell off the specialized machinery to the highest bidder.
And then they burn the empty, useless husk of the building to the ground just to claim the insurance money.
It is terrifying specifically because it is so hyper-rational and devoid of emotion.
But this cold, calculating machine is immediately contrasted in the text with the grim, desperate, highly emotional passion of the people actively being liquidated.
We get the heartbreaking story of Black Rayla.
Yes, the contrast is stark. Rayla is a hardened mercenary commander leading a small contingent in the Aedirnian rearguard.
While Evertson is sitting comfortably in his tent doing his accounting and projecting profit margins, Rayla and her handful of exhausted, terrified men are making a last, completely hopeless stand at a makeshift barricade.
Their only goal is to buy a few extra minutes of time for crowds of panicked, defenseless refugees fleeing the advancing army.
And the cruelest irony is that they aren't even attacked by the disciplined Nilfgaardian regulars.
They are attacked by the Scoia'tael, the elven rebels who are now fighting as a vanguard on Nilfgaard's behalf.
And Rayla's unit dies. Brutally. Every last one of them is slaughtered.
Rayla herself goes down fighting, surrounded by enemies, hacked to pieces in a completely futile, tactically meaningless, but fiercely, tragically human sacrifice.
It's so sad.
We saw the wild, explosive, unpredictable magic unleashed on the island of Thained, magic that tore an ancient stone palace apart in a matter of minutes.
Yep.
But looking at Evertson's ledgers and Rayla's futile death, is Emperor Emhyr's highly organized, bureaucratic approach to war, the meticulous spreadsheets, the calculated asset stripping, the optimized distribution of slave labor,
Yeah.
is that actually more terrifying and ultimately more destructive than the raw, chaotic power of the mages?
Ultimately, yes, it is vastly more destructive.
Wow.
Magical chaos, as terrifying as it is inherently localized. A mage throws a fireball and destroys a room or perhaps a building. But a spreadsheet destroys an entire nation.
That's a great way to put it.
The bureaucratic machinery of the Nilfgaardian Empire is a relentless, grinding, unstoppable system that efficiently turns human beings into numbers on a page.
Evertson's cold calculations ensure that the immense suffering of the northern people isn't an accidental byproduct of war.
No, it is the carefully designed, mathematically optimized intent of the campaign.
The magical explosion on Thained was merely a spark, a distraction, but the bureaucracy is the massive, enduring fire that is methodically consuming the continent.
And the ultimate bitter tragedy of this entire narrative is that the leaders who possess the power to stop this fire long before it spread chose instead to look the other way.
Hoping the flames would only burn their neighbors.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final, devastating thematic core of the text.
The absolute emptiness of neutrality.
The geopolitical chessboard is fully revealed in the aftermath of the invasion, and we are forced to look directly at the true, soul-crushing cost of trying to stay out of the fight.
Throughout the entire text, we see various characters attempt to find a middle ground, to negotiate a separate peace, to appease the aggressor in hopes of being spared.
And in every single instance, the text demonstrates with brutal clarity that, to quote the overarching theme, neutrality is always contemptible.
Let's look at the actions of the human kings first, who actually had the power to change the tide.
King Foltest of Temeria and King Henselt of Cadwin.
These are powerful monarchs who had standing, sworn military alliances with King Demavend of Aetern.
When the massive Nilfgaardian war machine rolls across Demavend's borders, Foltest and Henselt should have immediately mobilized their armies and marched to his defense.
That was the treaty.
Instead, they panic. They strike secret backroom pacts with Emperor Emhyr.
They secure their own immediate borders, agree to a cowardly non-aggression pact, and effectively abandon their ally, Demavend,
leaving his kingdom to be completely overrun and his people to be slaughtered, displaced, or enslaved by Everton's bailiff.
They traded their honor, their sworn word, and the lives of hundreds of thousands of their allies for a temporary, incredibly fragile peace.
They thought they were being clever diplomats, but they were just cowards.
But the elves face an even more agonizing, morally compromising situation.
Right. Francesca Findabair, the elven sorceress who actively betrayed the Brotherhood and allied herself with Nilfgaard during the coup.
She is seemingly rewarded by Emperor Emhyr for her treason.
She is made the ruling queen of the Free Elves in a newly established, supposedly independent homeland called Dol Blethana.
On the surface, it seems like a monumental historical victory for her people.
But there is a devastating, soul-destroying catch.
Emperor Emhyr doesn't give gifts without strings.
To officially secure this new homeland, and more importantly, to appease the human kings Foltest and Henselt so they don't attack this new state, Emhyr gives Francesca an ultimatum.
She must officially, publicly condemn the Scoia'tael.
Her own elven freedom fighters, the very people who've been bleeding and dying in the forests for years fighting for elven liberation.
She is strictly forbidden from offering them any military aid, financial support, or even sanctuary within the borders of Dol Blethana.
She has to explicitly disavow them and leave them to die in the northern forests, fighting a hopeless, doomed guerrilla war against the human armies, just so she can rule her tiny, ash-covered kingdom in peace.
She finally gets the homeland she dreamed of, but she has to sacrifice the future of her own people to attain it.
It is the ultimate poisoned chalice.
She compromised with a ruthless empire, and the price of that compromise was the very soul of her people.
She is a queen of a nation built entirely on the betrayal of its own soldiers.
And Emperor Ember's masterful, chilling manipulation of reality goes even further when it comes to securing the ultimate political prize of the war.
Ciri.
Yeah. Ember's handling of the Ciri situation is a masterclass in sociopathic statecraft.
Emhyr is presented with a young girl whom his agents have captured and claim is Ciri, the missing queen of Cintra.
The return of the heir is the entire political justification for his presence in the north.
But Emhyr, who knows the real Ciri intimately for reasons the text hints at, realizes the absolute second he looks at this girl that she is a fraud.
She is a fake, a terrified lookalike caught up in the machinery of the empire.
But does the Emperor expose her? Does he punish the agents who brought her to him?
No. He publicly, warmly embraces her in front of his entire court.
He gives her the grand titles, validates her identity, and then immediately sends her away to a distant, isolated castle to maintain the political narrative that he holds the rightful, unquestioned heir to Cintra.
Because for Emhyr, the actual truth is completely irrelevant.
The image of having Ciri is just as politically useful to him as actually having her.
He uses the fake Ciri to legitimize his conquests in the eyes of the nobility and the conquered populace. He controls the narrative entirely.
But behind closed doors, while the fake Ciri sits in a gilded cage, he secretly unleashes the true terror of his intelligence apparatus.
He summons Vate de Rideau, the head of military intelligence,
Stefan Skellen, his most ruthless special forces commander,
and the dark astromancer Zarthesius.
He tasks them with a shadow war, to hunt down the real Ciri at any cost, and to exact a brutal vengeance on the traitor Vilgefortz, who tried to steal her for himself.
Emhyr completely controls the truth by fabricating a lie that serves his purpose while relentlessly hunting the actual truth in the shadows.
Then while ruthless pragmatists like Emhyr thrive and expand their power through this horrific manipulation, the characters who desperately clung to idealism and procedural fairness are utterly destroyed by the reality they refuse to face.
We have to look at the final fate of Tissaia de Vries.
Tissaia, the proud archmistress who lifted the anti-magic blockade on Thanedd in the naive name of preserving the Brotherhood's unity, is forced to realize the absolute catastrophic failure of her ideals.
She sees with horrifying clarity that her rigid adherence to neutrality, her obsession with fairness, directly caused the destruction of her ancient order, the deaths of her peers, and paved the way for a continental war that will kill millions.
And her end is incredibly bleak, serving as the final, tragic punctuation mark on the book's thesis.
She doesn't die in battle. She retreats to her quarters.
She sits in her immaculate, perfectly ordered room. She straightens the tablecloth, ensuring everything is exactly in its proper place.
A final, futile attempt to exert control over a chaotic world.
She pens a final letter acknowledging her failure to the ordinary people she swore to guide, and then, completely broken by the weight of her own hubris and the collapse of her ideals, she takes her own life.
It is the tragic, inevitable result of trying to apply rigid, theoretical rules to a world defined by fluid, ruthless pragmatism.
There is a famous historical saying, "You can't be neutral on a moving train."
Right.
But I think it is worth challenging this thesis just for a moment to truly understand the impossible choices these characters faced.
Right.
Even though the text explicitly calls neutrality contemptible, didn't kings like Foltest and Henselt make the strictly rational, albeit emotionally ruthless, choice?
How do you mean?
Well, if you are a monarch, isn't your absolute first duty to save your own citizens, your own farmers and merchants, from being fed into the Nilfgaardian meat grinder? Even if it means breaking a treaty and abandoning an ally to burn. Isn't survival the ultimate moral imperative of a leader?
From a pure short-term survival standpoint, it is an entirely rational calculation.
Right.
But the text aggressively asks us to consider the long-term compounding cost of that cold rationality.
Okay.
By sitting back and allowing Aedern to fall, Foltest and Henselt have not stopped the Empire. They have merely allowed Nilfgaard to easily position its massive, battle-tested armies right on their own borders.
Oh, that's true.
They haven't prevented the war from reaching their lands. They've simply postponed it by a season.
And worse, they have ensured that when the Nilfgaardian war machine inevitably turns its attention to them, they will face it entirely alone, having completely destroyed any trust with potential allies.
Exactly. Their appeasement didn't buy lasting peace. It only bought a tiny, fleeting sliver of time. And they paid for it with their strategic depth, their political integrity, and ultimately, their long-term survival.
The era of the lone hero and the neutral observer is truly dead and buried under the rubble of Thayned.
It really is.
We've taken an incredible, dense journey through this text today. We started in the quiet, ink-stained office of a bank, watching a dwarf accurately read the economic tea leaves of an impending catastrophic war through tax ledgers and boat orders.
We walked through the beautiful, rotting, superficial illusions of a magical banquet that shattered instantly into a bloody, desperate coup.
We watched legendary heroes fall, their swords and their moral codes broken over the knee of a new, ruthless world order.
We examined the cold, calculating spreadsheets of a bureaucratic war machine, systematically stripping a conquered nation to the bone.
And we saw the devastating, soul-crushing cost extracted from everyone who attempted to stay neutral.
It is a massive, incredibly complex architecture of conflict that Sapkowski has built.
It really is.
And just as a final reminder to our listeners as we wrap up, all the political betrayals, the secret military pacts, the brutal economic tactics, and the agonizing moral compromises we dissected today were strictly an exploration of the fictional world of Time of Contempt.
Absolutely. But before we go, I want to leave you with one lingering thought to mull over.
Okay.
We saw Emperor Emhyr accept a fake Ciri to maintain his grand political narrative, effectively turning an innocent, terrified girl into a disposable geopolitical pawn on his vast chessboard.
Right.
He believes he completely controls the board. But what happens when the pawn finally realizes the true nature of the role she's being forced to play?
Oh, that's a good question.
If the Time of Contempt systematically destroys all the old rules of honor, magic, and neutrality, who is actually going to write the new rules?
Will it be the Emperor, backed by his massive armies and his relentless spreadsheets?
Will it be the mage, driven by his ruthless ambition and wielding his unbreakable iron staff?
Or will it be the girl, the child of destiny, who finally learned how to stop running from her nightmares, turn around, and fight back?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives around you, look closely at the ledgers in your own world, and we'll see you next time.